German modal verbs are weird, like they make no sense. They're weirdly conjugated, you gotta push the other verb to the end of the sentence as an infinitive, it's a whole thing. So you end up with verbs that are like mögen changes to ich mag, and verbs like wollen changes to ich will. It's a weird thing, but how do they work in the past? That's an interesting question because in the perfect tense, it requires haben and sein and a past participle to make it without a modal verb. So if a modal requires the infinitive at the end of the sentence, what do you do when you have both haben and sein or haben or sein and a past participle and an infinitive and a modal? Where are all of these parts going? What do you do? So if I want to say something like that, I would have to phrase it like this. Ich habe nach Hause gehen wollen. I wanted to go home. That's weird and confusing. So basically what I've done here is I have a form of haben that is conjugated. It goes in the normal spot where the conjugated verb goes, and then I pushed two verbs to the end of the sentence, one of which is the modal verb, which is the thing that caused me to move the verbs to the end of the sentence anyway. And then we also have the other infinitive of the other verb that we had, which is to go. We put the going one first and then the wanting one after that. And it basically functions kind of like a weird leapfrog effect. So we started out with ich will nach Hause gehen, I want to go home, and gehen was pushed to the end of the sentence. And then we put in the haben in there and pushed wollen to the end of the sentence too. So we end up with two different verbs back there at the end. Ich habe nach Hause gehen wollen. I wanted to go home. So we have to do this with all of the modal verbs that we have. We have mögen, müssen, dürfen, können, sollen, and wollen. But what about möchten, you say? Well, möchten is a weird one. It's not technically a verb. It's just something we made up. Therefore, there is no past tense version of it. You can't really say, like, I would have liked without actually using a different verb, so using the passive voice kind of thing. So in order to say that, we just ignore möchten for today's lesson. As you saw from the first example that I gave, it was a little bit weird and clunky to use both haben and a modal verb and another verb. So basically the only time that I would personally use the perfect tense is when there isn't an extra verb. Simply use haben and the past participle of the modal verb. So for example, you would end up having gemocht or gemusst or gedurft, gekonnt, gewollt. All of those are the past participles. I'll show you some example sentences to see what I mean. Ich habe den Film gar nicht gemocht. I didn't like the film at all. Hat dringend auf die Toilette gemusst. He really had to go to the bathroom. Das habe ich nicht gedurft. I wasn't allowed to do that. Sie hat es damals nicht gekonnt. She wasn't able to do it back then. Das Kind hat das nicht gesollt. The child should not have done that. Ich habe keinen Furby gewollt. I didn't want a Furby. In case you didn't catch them, here are all of the Partizip 2 of modal verbs. Mögen becomes gemocht. Müssen becomes gemusst. Dürfen becomes gedurft. Können becomes gekonnt. Sollen becomes gesollt. And wollen becomes gewollt. Personally, I would only use mögen and wollen in the perfect tense. Most of the time, these two don't have an extra verb, so I wouldn't actually have to use the extra verb plus haben and sein and all of that mess that I mentioned before. For the examples that I just gave, I would actually use the Präteritum in every single one of them. If you really wanted to do it, however, this is what it would look like. Hat dringend auf die Toilette gehen müssen. He really had to go to the bathroom. Ich habe keine Süßigkeiten essen dürfen. I wasn't allowed to eat any sweets. Sie hat damals die Zeit nicht lesen können. She wasn't able to read the time back then. Das Kind hat das andere Kind nicht schlagen sollen. The child should not have hit the other child. Ich habe keinen Furby bekommen wollen. I didn't want to get a Furby. Pretty much no one is going to say that. Instead, I would actually say this for all of these sentences. Ich mochte den Film gar nicht. I didn't like the film at all. Musste dringend auf die Toilette gehen. He really had to go to the bathroom. Ich durfte keine Süßigkeiten essen. I wasn't allowed to eat any sweets. Sie konnte damals die Zeit nicht lesen. She wasn't able to read the time back then. Das Kind sollte das andere Kind nicht schlagen. The child should not have hit the other child. Ich wollte keinen Furby bekommen. I didn't want to get a Furby. Notice what I did here is I conjugate the Präteritum version of the modal verb, and then I just put the other verb at the end of the sentence. This is extremely similar to what happens in the present tense, where we're just using the infinitive form of the other verb at the end of the sentence, and we conjugate the modal verb where the other verb usually goes. Quick side note about mögen becoming mochte in that last one. This is actually how we ended up with möchten. So basically what happens whenever you're trying to make the Präteritum into the Konjunktiv 2, or the simple past tense or the written past tense, and you're changing it into the hypothetical or the contrary to reality kind of thing. If you're doing that in German, generally speaking, it just goes whatever the Präteritum tense version of the verb is, and then add some umlauts to stuff. So mochte becomes möchte. So we end up with mögen, which is to like, mochte, liked, past tense, and then möchte, which is would like, or the hypothetical might have liked in that kind of sense. Now let's look at the full conjugation of all of the modal verbs in the Präteritum tense. Mögen, to like. Ich mochte, du mochtest, sie es mochte. Wir mochten, ihr mochtet, sie mochten. Müssen, to have to or must. Ich musste, du musstest, sie es musste. Wir mussten, ihr musstet, sie mussten. Dürfen, to be allowed to or may. Ich durfte, du durftest, sie es durfte. Wir durften, ihr durftet, sie durften. Können, can, or to be able to. Ich konnte, du konntest, sie es konnte. Wir konnten, ihr konntet, sie konnten. Sollen, should, or to be supposed to. Ich sollte, du solltest, sie es sollte. Wir sollten, ihr solltet, sie sollten. Wollen, to want. Ich wollte, du wolltest, sie es wollte. Wir wollten, ihr wolltet, sie wollten. If you can conjugate the modal verbs in this tense, everything else about them is simple. Just put the other verb at the end of the sentence in the infinitive form. There is one little thing that I need to mention though, and that is sollen in the simple past tense is sollte, and it's also the Konjunktiv 2 version, which is sollte. So this is kind of a weird little thing that happens with this verb. It's both Konjunktiv 2 and the simple past, but depending on context, it could be one or the other. The context is key in this sentence. Du solltest deinen Bruder nicht schlagen. You shouldn't hit your brother. This is a recommendation. You shouldn't have hit your brother. Du solltest deinen Bruder nicht schlagen. This is a statement about the past, but it's the exact same sentence. Here are some example sentences of modal verbs in the past tense. After these examples, I'll ask you to try it out in the comments. Ich wollte immer nach Japan reisen. I always wanted to travel to Japan. Du durftest damals keinen Kaffee trinken. You weren't allowed to drink coffee back then. Wir mussten den Zug nehmen, weil kein Bus zur Verfügung stand. We had to take the train because there was no bus available. Wir konnten den Berg ohne Hilfe besteigen. We could climb the mountain without help. Wir sollten uns 10 Uhr am Bahnhof treffen. We should have met at the train station at 10 o'clock. Be forewarned, however, this sentence could be translated as we should meet at 10 o'clock at the train station, so a recommendation. Sie konnte sich alles leicht merken. She could memorize everything easily. Sie durfte den geheimen Bereich im Museum betreten. She was allowed to enter the secret area in the museum. Wir wollten das Spiel sehen, aber es hat geregnet. We wanted to watch the game, but it rained. Mochtest du die Filme von diesem Regisseur? Did you like the films by this director? durfte nicht mit uns zum Konzert gehen. He was not allowed to go to the concert with us. Mochte früher keine Tomaten. He didn't used to like tomatoes. Ich konnte gestern nicht kommen, weil ich krank war. I couldn't come yesterday because I was sick. Sie sollte sich bei ihm entschuldigen. She should have apologized to him. Again, be careful, this one could be she should apologize to him. Wir durften früher gehen, da wir fertig waren. We were allowed to leave earlier because we were finished. Sie wollte ein neues Kleid kaufen. She wanted to buy a new dress. Sie musste früh ins Bett gehen, da sie müde war. She had to go to bed early because she was tired. And now for some practice exercises. Translate the following sentences to German, then write them in the comments down below. You wanted to become a doctor when you were young. We didn't especially like the theater play. I had to work overtime yesterday. I should have participated in more sports, my doctor said. I was not allowed to stay up so late as a child. He could answer all of the questions on the quiz. Write your answers in the comments down below. If you're looking for resources to help you along your German learning journey, I have spent over 10 years reviewing every single German resource I can get my hands on, and I've compiled a list of the best into a free PDF that you can find at germanwithantrim.com. Go there now and download your free German resources PDF, and get a bonus of my goal-setting template to help you get on the right track and stay on it. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!